Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to episode number 96, part 2 of Speaking from the Heart. Now, if you weren't able to join us in part 1, I'm going to ask you to stop and go back and listen to part 1 because it was such a powerful part 1 that it will set up the conversation that we have in part 2. But just in case, if you're joining us, Kaneshi Hart was my guest, and I want to give a little bit of her background again in case you want to learn a little bit about her. Kaneshi is a Jesus-loving, home-inhabiting businesswoman who does and enjoys a variety of things. In the business world, she hosts the Coach Up podcast, where she interviews 6- and 7-figure coaches about how they build their businesses. She also connects businesses looking for places to advertise for podcasts who have the audiences those businesses want to target. Kaneshi is also a budding trader in the stock market and believes everyone needs to know how to extract money at any time from this multi-trillion-dollar industry. Kaneshi arrived at the wonderful world of podcasting after spending almost 20 years in corporate America, where she led and coached high-performance teams and was responsible for over 600 employees and over $300 million in revenue generation in the course of her work. But now, on the other side of corporate life, she's enjoying helping other people build their businesses through the power of connection and conversation. I have to say that when we got through this interview, my mouth dropped open. You see, back in episode 26, in which I interviewed Matthew Rhoda, I made the promise at the end of part 2 of that episode that I would let him know when I found somebody that was living an authentic life. And my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, I think I found this lady not just because we were meant to connect on this important topic, but there was a promise that we made to each other at the end of this episode that even to this day, I am still thinking about the importance of why it's so entailed to have a coach, to have somebody that truly believes in you and is willing to go no matter what kind of distance to help you show what kind of hope that you have to make the future better. It isn't just about making a 6- or 7-figure business, but it's about having accountability, love, and that ability and that reality to say what you really have to say when it counts the most. Kaneshi was one of those guests that at the end, I just couldn't hold myself back from saying what was truly on my heart, because this episode, overall, really epitomizes the importance of why I started this project in the first place, and why it's so important to always, truly speak from the heart. But with that, let's go to the conclusion, part 2 of my interview with Kaneshi Hart.
Wait. So you're telling me you don't know your why? I mean, I feel that, Kaneshi, you have this why inside of you that you've been really articulating to me. So I feel that you need to define that a bit for me in the audience. Explain what you mean by you haven't figured out your why yet.
Okay, wait, Josh. Okay. You said you feel like I've been articulating it for you. I'm going to ask you to be a mirror for me real quick. What have you heard? Because you might be able to help me.
I have to explain this to the audience.
Okay.
So one of the things that I think as a coach, I always say to people is, what is it that you really want to be? So kind of laying that out. What is it that you want to achieve? You've talked about, even earlier, what you want to achieve with opening a business, wanting to help people, really connecting because you love people. You have all those elements, right? So usually in my business, I've talked about this in other episodes about SMART goals. So it's being specific, measurable, attainable, blah, 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 blah. You have those aspects already in your head and you're articulating them so eloquently to me and our listeners. So I feel that you have some of that. To build upon this, I feel like what you're saying is that you like to help people. So why not be a coach? Why not help others to achieve greatness as you are achieving that greatness right now through the love that you have for Jesus, for the things that you've done to achieve what you've been achieving through the podcast? You are doing the work. And I think this is an important lesson for listeners that this is essentially what we have to do. We have to kind of negotiate with ourselves what we're trying to achieve. So tell me today, on this episode that you're going to open a business, you're going to help the people that you really want to help, but more importantly, you're going to achieve that success that you define. You're going to do that for me, right?
It's inevitable, right? It has to be done. Either we have to do it or we just live with regret and disappointment. And who wants to live in that space? So I like what you said, and I appreciate the challenge, Josh, because as you were making that point, there were some things that came up for me, which tells me you're a good coach. I can already see that.
Thank you for that.
Because that's exactly what coaches do, right? Like you draw out, you make your client, and in this case, your guest, really think about things for ourselves, right? And reflect back to it. So thank you for doing that. So as you talked about that, all right, why am I not a coach? And what do I already do that already helps people maybe would be in that space? I'll tell you a quick story with my substitute teaching. Right now, as a substitute teacher in my district, it's beautiful. I go online either the night before or the morning of, and I get to pick where I go to work that day, if I want to work that day. And it's super easy. I don't know the children. I don't have a connection. I'm going in to facilitate what a teacher needed me to do, and then I'm gone. No connection. But over the last month and for another 30 days coming, I actually have taken on what they call a long-term sub position where I'm with the same kids for 8 weeks and I'm responsible for their learning. And Josh, to your point, I have so much more purpose. I have so much more drive. I have so much more investment and joy in knowing that these little minds who get on my last nerves quite often, but they are precious. But these little minds are my responsibility to mold, to grow, to help become better in this time space. And that truly drives me, right? So when I think about my why, I can reflect on that and say, I've not had that in a long time because working for myself, I don't have a team yet, right? But I did leadership, leading teams, managing teams, supporting teams for almost 2 decades, over 2 decades. And that is, yeah, there's a joy that comes. And I think to your point, again, like your why, when you know it, or when you're operating in it, or your purpose, like there is a joy that just naturally comes. It doesn't mean stuff isn't hard. It doesn't mean there's not parts that you don't enjoy, but like I truly walk away with a sense of joy. And so why am I not a coach? I don't think at the moment that's supposed to be my space, because in this season where I'm getting to be with these children for a time and lead them, and I compare that to like one-on-one coaching, I realize I really do well with the team. I really do well with the group. Right.
Why don't you do team coaching then?
I'm tired of you. I'm tired of you, Josh.
No, seriously. Because if you don't like working on an individual basis, because there are various different types of coaching for that matter. And we all work in different avenues or modalities, if you will, to create those spaces for helping others. So if you like working with multiple people, why not team coaching? Why not something in that field? Whether it's not coaching, it's something else. Kaneshi, I am challenging you. I really am. I'm putting you on the spot. But I think I see this passion and this energy. And my listeners, I'm just going to describe what I see right now. I see a beautiful lady smiling from chin to chin. And she is, well, cheek to cheek, I should say. And definitely creating this value for all of us that we need to be able to learn to just have these tough conversations that we're so afraid of having. Because we're not living our fullest potential. And and my heart goes out for those people, especially you right now, as I put you as the victim here of my sort of charade of questions. But I think it's so important because of the people that you surround yourself with to do this.
Yes. Because you've got to have people to challenge you, right? Because we can talk ourselves out of stuff in a heartbeat, and we let ourselves off the hook so very much. And again, to your point, there's a disconnect. I can tell the difference when I'm working on my own on the podcast, when I'm working in the business. I'm having to do the marketing. I'm having to do the admin. I'm having to do all that stuff that does not bring me any joy. There's a difference in that when I'm talking to a guest. We're having this amazing conversation today. There's a different light. There's a different energy. There's a different light and energy for me when I'm working with these children that I get the privilege of helping. And so, yes, to your point, when I'm not there, it's not as fun of a place. And so why not push myself, challenge myself to do what you're talking about? I don't know what it looks like, but I can agree with you. And I will say I enjoy one-on-one coaching in the midst of a group. So I love that one-on-one because, and you know this, Josh, and I know you've seen it. We talked about it earlier.
Yep.
Where you get to see people's lives change. They overcome obstacles. They reach new heights. Okay, let me share this with your client, your guest. Okay. Guys.
My listeners.
Your listeners, your guests. Y'all are all our guests today.
They're all my guests, but you're my listeners, but I hope you'll be my guests at some point along with even my clients. But anyways, go on.
All of that.
Yes.
I want people to know, no matter what you're doing and who you're working with, if you work with people in any capacity or on your own, set your bar high and set the bar high for people around you, because people will rise to the bar that you set for them. And then they will thank you for believing in them more than they believed in themselves, for seeing more in them than they saw in themselves. And, temper it with how they are. Don't set unrealistic standards for people. But I truly have seen when you hold people to a higher standard, they rise to that and people love it. One of my team members told me, it's been almost 8 years, but one of the things for me is I think on things for 48 hours. Like I don't make decisions immediately. Everybody's different, but that's me. But in my one-on-one session with her, we had that conversation. She was going through some stuff. And years later, she sent me a message on Facebook. This has been in the last year. And she was like, I still make decisions. She had done something. I congratulated her on her. And she said, well, I made the decision because I still wait 48 hours before I make a decision. When you have those moments that you've impacted somebody, and you've helped them to make adjustments in their lives, you're right. There's a joy. And so I know my why is to help people. I just need to figure out, in addition to the podcast, in addition to the business that I'm building, how else that looks. That's also fulfilling for other people as well as me. So I think I have some work to do.
I'm going to throw more challenge on you.
Come on.
Because you said about not liking the marketing, the admin stuff for that. But we were just talking about that. That's why we have interns. Those are the people that do that work. You are designed to do the things that you enjoy, that you're passionate about. So hire somebody. Here, this is some advice for the listeners too, even for you, Kaneshi. Hire the people that love doing the accounting. Hire the people that love to do the marketing. I have 2 people in my life. I'm going to give them a quick shout out because I haven't yet, but I'm hoping to have them yet on the show at some point. Deborah Marson, who is my bookkeeper. She's been a phenomenal person. Make sure I'm staying in the clear and making sure that I have everything accounted for. But I also have a media marketing firm that's helped me with my social media postings and my website, Corey and Brittany Hart of Enzo Digital LLC. Those 2 groups help me so much so that I don't have to worry about those things. I can focus on what I love, coaching and podcasting, which at some point I would love to pass along the editing of my podcast because I absolutely despise it to somebody else because I'm not that tech savvy when it comes to that sometimes. And I know people have more of a creative niche. But here's my deal. This is why I'm saying all this, not only to you, Kaneshi, but to the listeners. You have a gift. Use it to its fullest potential because you only have one life to live.
It's true.
And we only have so much finite time, like we were just talking about earlier about time management.
Yep.
I think that you have this heart of gold that you've been sharing so far that I think that you are destined for greatness. I will say that to you because you do the Coaching Up podcast. You surround yourself with 6-7-figure business owners that have created so much significant value, not just monetarily, but with relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Because above all else, that is what's really important.
Yeah.
And you have a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
You have a relationship with people that love you. Why not? Make me a promise, okay? Can you make me a promise?
Let's see what this promise is, Josh. What you got?
By the next time that you're on my show, which you will be back on my show at some point, I want to hear that not only did you open your business, not only are you doing what you are called to do, you found your why, but you're also one of those 6 or 7-figure business owners that I get to interview. Can you make me that promise?
I will commit to that with a caveat for you.
What's the caveat to me?
Yes. That likewise, the next time I'm on your podcast, you will be a 6 or 7 figure business owner, and I will get to have you on my podcast.
Deal.
Done.
If I'm going to hold you to the same standard, I'm
Yep.
going to be doing the same work because it's about accountability. That's what coaches do.
Yes.
And that's what's really creating a lot of those different things. So
That's
here,
it.
I want to put this back into the general conversation because I've really just been challenging you the last 20 minutes, and I feel
I
like I've just
appreciate it.
been doing that. But I think this is just a real life example for people of sometimes the things that we wrestle with. But
Mhm.
you've been through so much with the layoffs.
Mhm.
A lot of people have been through a lot of things with COVID. I struggled, and I've even let my listeners know way in the past about my struggles with that, especially after I tried suicide and go on a recovery process that was prolonged because of COVID.
Mhm.
You have gone through hell. Let's be real. You have gone through hell having to stick to your beliefs and stay confirmed to those beliefs.
Mhm.
What is your purpose? I really want you to answer that question. It isn't just about the why that we were just talking about.
Mhm.
What is your real purpose?
I think it is to be, man, thank you for this question. And I say that because we don't ask ourselves these enough. And even if we do, answering ourselves is hard, but when you have to say it to somebody else, it really makes you think about it, and hopefully it makes you honest. So thank you.
I don't like asking that question to myself because I would be, well,
Right.
but, I would have all kinds of filler words, which from my Toastmaster audiences, I know, I just counted them all. It was about 4 or 5. Don't worry. I got a tracker. But it's part of that. We are
Yeah.
so concerned about what those things are that
Mm-hmm.
we obsess about it. So I think
Yeah.
that we kind of overcompensate for it. So I understand because I would feel uncomfortable about it too. But
Mm-hmm.
putting you on the spot is probably the best thing for not only myself, but for other people listening to this that need that hope to
Yeah.
know that they do have that purpose. So
Yeah.
I'll ask you again.
Mm-hmm.
What is your purpose, Kaneshi Hart?
When you ask me that question, this is what comes to mind. 2 things, and hopefully they're interrelated. One is it is to be an example to people, and maybe slightly more with an emphasis on women, but not necessarily. But I am a woman and love being a woman, and so connect.
And honestly, let's just call it out for what it is. You're a black woman. But
Amen.
but
I
you
love
know
it.
what? You are a successful, powerful black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I will go to my grave appreciating everybody, regardless of skin color, sex,
Absolutely.
creed, origin. Who cares? You're
Right.
doing it. So, anyways, I have to say that. I
No?
really do. I feel that we shy away from that conversation. Me being a white dude, I get it. Oh, he has all the power. He controls it. No, he doesn't.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
we all have this equal shot. And I
Correct.
know that we sometimes say, well, society tells us we don't. Bullshit.
Right. Correct. Society doesn't dictate the decisions that we make. Society doesn't dictate what we choose to do and not to do, right? And so we have to forge our own path by our own decisions. And so, yes, so I am a lover of Jesus. I am a woman, and I am born to amazing parents who are Black. All of that applies to me. And so my purpose is to show others what is possible and to be that example for them. And the second thing that comes to mind is I believe the Lord has given me this dream, and I believe it was spoken over me that I am supposed to help women who are in sex trafficking. And Josh, it's not just helping them get back on their feet, but it is the totality of showing them what confidence looks like again, showing them what hope looks like again, showing them that as a woman, you can walk powerfully, you can walk confidently, you can walk in the dreams, right? You can, like you were just talking about, it's not society that dictates what we do, it is us. We make those decisions regardless of our background, our sex, all of that. And so I feel like my purpose is to provide that hope, to be that example of that hope for people who are in my space that God sends to my space, because we all have space, like we were talking about earlier for you. You have a story, Josh, that people need to hear. And you have gone through so much of yourself but you are on the other side, like, and not even on the other side. I guess that's a bad way to look at it because we're all still living life, but you have overcome something that is truly difficult and you're still walking forward and you're choosing to make a difference for other people. You're choosing to be courageous every single day. You're choosing to pour back into people when you had a time when you didn't feel like anybody was pouring into you, right? That is powerful. And there are people who will connect only with you. So you have to share your story. You have to continue to be brave. And so I challenge you to continue to do that and more because people need to hear from Josh. They absolutely need to hear from you. There are people who will consider taking their lives. There are people who will consider starting a business. There are people who will want to be a coach. There are people who want to be a podcast, and they will not do it if they don't get to hear Josh on Speaking from the Heart, or they don't get to hear Josh on a stage sharing his story or sharing about how he built his coaching business or sharing the insights you have as a coach. They won't, because they need your voice, because you are unique and special and made for a reason. And the life that you're living correlates with thousands, if not millions of other lives that need to connect with you. And every single person has that. And so I think for me, my purpose is to be that example for those people who need to come, that possible is probable for you. And yeah, okay. Man, thanks. Wow.
I have to say this, and for my listeners, this is me being really authentically speaking from the heart for a moment. I'm literally on the verge of tears, as I usually sometimes am when I have these long-winded conversations with people. And the last time I can even think back was episode 26. For those that have been longtime followers, you know that was the famous Matthew Rhoda episode in which I found out that Matt was doing drugs. He found his guardian angel, Helen, his wife, and has really changed his life for the better, running 3 businesses. So putting that all aside, I had Kaneshi, this gentleman, next morning he says to me, "That was the most impactful interview that I've ever done on any podcast, and you've changed my life forever." And to hear you say that to me, even in this very moment, makes me reaffirm the fact that I'm literally 4 episodes away from episode 100. And this has been a life-changing experience for me, because what originally started as a concept where I just wanted to really get myself out there, to get my story out there, to let people know a little bit about who I am and what this is all about, has turned into something that has significantly and forever changed my life. And it's because of people like you that live that life wholeheartedly, that want to explore and inspire others to create not only those opportunities, but to share what has been on our hearts. And being a fellow podcast host, I think you're going to relate to this next question that I have for you. There's been many people probably on your show that have been inspired, which, just to remind people, because we've been talking for a while about your Coach Up podcast that you have. Who has been the most impactful person that you've had on the show, and how has that changed you for the better?
First, I want to say I have to echo your guest, because this conversation, Josh, you not backing down and challenging me to really articulate what my purpose is, dig into that why. There's a fire, a new fire, like it's like the fire is being rekindled in me. So thank you. So this conversation is in the top 5 right now, and I'm not even interviewing you. Oh my goodness.
So you can't say me to the answer to that question.
But I'll tell you. So one of them, 2 of them come to mind. One is Maya Heradat. So her episode came out about September 2023. So if you want to check that out, amazing. She's an amazing woman. But what I loved about her interview, and really the after conversation, like you and I had an amazing conversation before we started. I really think you should record some of those conversations and use them as outtakes, because it was a fire. Y'all missed some fire conversation with Josh and I.
Absolutely.
Her conversation and mine, even after we got done, she was the catalyst to help me birth my business that I'm building as the extension of my podcast. We were talking about sponsorships for podcasts. You have a podcast, I have a podcast, people who have podcasts usually want sponsors. That's one way that we monetize our podcast. And I wanted to help with that, but because of how she is, who she is, how she has a heart to serve. She was talking to me about my idea of connecting businesses with podcasts. And so helping businesses find the podcast that they want to advertise on. So the podcast can get the money that they're looking for, the business can get in front of the audience that they want, and the business and the podcast don't have to do the work to find each other. I will do that. That's the business that I'm building. I know you were going to ask me about that earlier. There it is. But
Boom, there goes what it is that she is doing, because she will do it, because she's a successful woman.
And
Absolutely.
I've committed it to you.
You did.
Yeah.
You're doing it.
Absolutely. Already done. So her asking me questions that help to really sink that idea. And then she said these words to me, Josh, similar to what she said. She said, I need what you're going to offer, because I'm not going, she has a coaching business, obviously. And so she needs people to find a podcast that has her audience. And she said, I need people to do what you're doing. And that is a 7-figure business. And just to hear somebody breathe that belief into that idea, there was such a peace, praise the Lord, that just came and sat with me. I just knew, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. So she was amazing. And then really quickly, the other one that really impacted me was Tim Winders is a coach who, in the first, I think, quarter of a year, he and his wife had gone from like multi-millions to homeless. And their homeless life was crazy, but that's a whole nother story. You can go listen to the episode. But then the first 3 months after they bounced back, they made like $300, $500 in 3 months. And then at the end of the year, they had 12 streams of income. Sometimes you just need, and just to hear him talk about it, sometimes you just need those belief barriers broken, right? Because we hear the thing, anything is possible, but do we really believe it? Like, okay, Josh, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yes.
What is that thing that you want? You mentally know that it's possible, but you have a belief barrier that's keeping you from really, truly 100% believing it's for you.
Wow. That is really the toughest question that any podcast host has asked me. And even on my own podcast, for that matter, it's been the toughest question asked. You know, I think that sometimes we hold ourselves back from really the ultimate true selves that we have lying dormant. And I'll tell you, I have that same fire that you've just talked about earlier. And I have many times tried to take a bucket of water and try to extinguish it, but it keeps on lighting itself back up. I will say that without disclosing the names of individuals, there have been certain individuals that have held me back. And I am so ready to lead a life in which I'm not dictated or detailed by some people or profiled for what I've done as actions, because that was old Josh. That was the old Josh that at 32 years of age wanted to pick up a kitchen knife and slit his wrist. Mm-hmm. Dead serious. Was ready to be done with it. The bricks on my back, as I've even mentioned on being guests on other shows, was too much to bear. But now, those bricks, they are the building materials that I'm using to create not just the best version of who I am, but ultimately what I was destined to be. And that is the single most biggest revelation that I've ever had in my entire life, which is why I ask you the question of who has been your biggest inspirations on your podcast, because I can mention Matthew Rhoda, who was really an awesome person. I had Brianne Didino, who was also a coach. She really challenged me to think about my thought patterns and ways in which I've been who I am. I've had classmates on the show saying, my God, you've changed so much. But then there's you. And challenging you has been the single most rewarding thing I have done yet on this show. And because of that, I think it means so much to me to know that you're willing to carry that forward. And even if you say to yourself, even immediately afterwards, that you can't do it, there's something else inside of you that will say, you can do it.
Absolutely.
And that's the voice you have to keep listening to.
Mm-hmm.
That's what is so important.
Yeah.
So those are some of the lessons I've learned, and that's really what leads into my final question for you. We've had an awesome conversation for an hour, literally, about all kinds of different things. You've challenged me. I've challenged you. We have our own promises that we have to uphold.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't yet challenged the listeners. So I'm going to give you the final word here. Here's my question. What would you say to our listeners to help challenge them? What's the challenge that you put out to them today to help them become not just the best versions of themselves, but with everything that you've been through, what is that one important thing that they should hear from such an awesome, talented, successful woman like yourself?
Find an accountability partner you don't necessarily like, and hear me well. It can't be a sandpaper person, right? Like you got to get along with them. But when I say you don't necessarily like, you won't like the fact that they've done what I have been blessed to have Josh do for me today. Challenge. That they will challenge you, that they will not let you off the hook. And why am I saying accountability? Because I can give you the normal cliche answers of get clear. That's important. I could give you the normal cliche answer of make sure that you are giving your all. We know all that. No, I'm going to say get an accountability partner. And it's not somebody who is where you are. It's somebody who's a little bit further than you. Not quite a mentor, even though they may mentor you in a little bit of a way. But the reason you need an accountability partner who's just a little bit ahead of you, and you got to figure out what that is. And I'll give you an example, right? You're starting a business. This person has had a business that is profitable or at least generating revenue for 6 months or for a year, right? It doesn't have to be a coach that's had a business for 10 years and they're generating 6 figures. No, that's a coach. That's different. Get an accountability partner. So somebody that you are somewhat close to, that you're going to tell them, this is what I'm committing to, what Josh has done for me today, and that likewise they're going to do, and you're going to hold them accountable. It is a two-way partnership, but it is a statistic that is proven that when you tell someone that you will, it's somewhere between 92 and 98, 92 or 98% more likely to achieve your goals if you write it down, we all know this, tell somebody, and then have that person, this is the important part, have that person check in with you to make sure you're doing it. You're in the 90 percentile more likely to achieve the goal if you add that. And so it's uncomfortable. It is, I love what Josh said, the voice you have to listen to, not the one that says, maybe I'm not. No, you choose to listen to the one that says, no, I committed, I will. You do that by you finding someone you're willing to put yourself out there to be honest with them about what you are doing. Because if you have an accountability partner and you don't tell them everything related to what you are asking them to hold you accountable for, it does you no good. You're willing to be honest and you're willing to allow them to be honest with you. Your feelings will be okay. They'll catch up. You can go cry later if they hurt your feelings. You will thank them because you'll cry tears of joy 6 months down the road when you have hit your goals, right? We all have feelings. None of us like this. But what is important is that for somebody to hold you accountable, to help you get to where you want to go, and for you to do that for somebody else. That would be the single most important thing I would tell people, Josh. And I would tell you guys as listeners, because that accountability piece is what's so often missing from our goal setting, our dreams, and our execution. And if you will be willing to do that, you will see an exponential growth in yourself first and in whatever it is that you're working to do.
I'm not adding anything to that. That was so well said. Kanesha, we're at the end of our time, but before we wrap up, I would like to have a moment or so to say some final words. But how can people reach out to you if they're interested in maybe talking with you some more? If you want to pitch your coaching podcast, Coaching Up podcast, I should say, that's the time to do it too. I would love for you to share a little bit about that as well in terms of how people can access it. But I'm going to give you these last few moments to do that.
Thank you. So kind and generous. I just want y'all to know what amazing podcast hosts y'all have, because not every podcast host is willing to do this. And so thank you, Josh. Y'all can find me at The Connection Collaborator on Instagram. You can find me at LinkedIn. My name, Kaneshi .Hart, Kaneshi Hart. I know when you spell that, you're going to be like, what? But yes, it is Kaneshi Hart. There is no A at the end of my name, just so you all know. Connect with me there. But yes, come listen to the Coach Up podcast. I think it's amazing. Obviously, y'all have an amazing podcast host here. And so just add it to the playlist. That's all. Make sure Speaking from the Heart stays in there. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Because it's going to be added to mine. And so add the Coach Up podcast if you are a podcast host or you're a small business owner. And small business owner includes service-based, product-based, brick and mortar, online, all of that. So coaches, consultants, all of those, social media people, aqueduct people, what have you. If you fall in either of those categories and you want to receive advertising dollars because you're a podcast host, or you want to find the podcast to advertise on, reach out to me and I will be happy to connect you so that your business can get the exposure and the marketing that you want to the audience that you want, and your podcast can be monetized. So that is how you can find me. And as Josh has challenged me, as you continue to follow, there may be coaching coming up somewhere.
Oh, there will be coaching. Absolutely. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
Kanesha, I want to take a moment to say this. There's been many people, 96 episodes, many of them monologue, many of them predominantly have been guests. I told Matthew Rhoda, which is why I brought him up earlier, that when I find the person that is leading an authentic life just like him, that I would reach out to him and let him know I found the person. And I really mean that, because sometimes we don't know what it means to just lead a life in which we might have the stupidest things happen for no reason whatsoever, and they're out of our control. But there's really two choices in which we have to lead. It's either we get sucked into that and we just become a funnel of negativity alongside all of them, or we decide to stand outside that box and be bold, to be beautiful, and to be willing to challenge what we are to the core, because we know we have an awesome gift. I promise you that when you're back on this show, we will celebrate those successes together. But until then, Kanesha, I really mean this. Thank you for speaking from the heart. It has been not only a tremendous honor, but it's been a privilege to hear from you today.
Thank you.
I, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank Kaneshi Hart so much for being part of this show and being the authentic person that she truly is. Because if it wasn't for this interview, I don't think that even now, as I record this a few months later after this interview, I would have felt the feeling that I have about my business, let alone the ability to know that I can keep pushing forward. Because even though that we do these episodes and we do them way in advance, I try to have a little bit of a break in between. But unfortunately, a lot of things personally happened to me after this interview that I'm not quite yet ready to share with all of you. But in episode 100, I will certainly talk a little bit about it. But I will say, to at least give you some context, that Kanesha is one of those spirited beings on this world that I don't think she even realizes her true talents and gifts, which is why I even challenged her. If I'm going to do a 6-figure coaching business, I want her to do the same as well. And I think that we have to be able to learn some of the techniques that she even discussed in part 2 that I want to recap now. So here's a couple things that I think are really interesting about our conversation in this part. First off, you have to challenge yourself for what you have and give yourself those opportunities to develop yourself. But at the same time, which I find is the most important piece of advice, is that you should wait 48 hours before you make any type of decision. Now, I get it. Some of you are already saying, Josh, hello, it's the real world. Sometimes I don't even have 2 seconds to even think about it. Why do I have to wait 48 hours? And that is a true point. And I respect that. But there are certain things that we should really wait to do until we actually give ourselves a little bit of breathing room to actually think about it. And the promise is that we have to be able to learn how to make that decision for ourselves so that we are able to feel a little bit more comfortable down the road that we truly made a thought-out decision. How can we be an example to others through that process? And I love the fact that Kanesha talked about a very important subject even to me, which is the whole human trafficking process, specifically helping women that have been through sex trafficking as well. Because there are a lot of things that are not covered as explicit as this subject. And I think that it's so fascinating to me that we don't give this topic more consideration. I know churches local to me have discussed this subject matter with their congregation and have opened it up to the public for public dialogue and solution making. But I don't think that's enough to be able to understand and make some actionable consequences against these people that do these sort of topics. So who are the people that we need to be really speaking to? What are the people that would help us to create that catalyst in our lives? Especially on a subject such as trafficking, how can we address those things? But more importantly, I think the question that underpins everything in our entire lives and is really the underpinning of this whole entire show is about this. What is making your heart vibrate? What is making it go thump, thump? I need to tell you something that was really pivotal about this episode in itself. Is that even when we were talking about in part one the importance of making that connection with people, is that we have to be able to understand that those people, those very same people, are the ones that we will depend on for our very livelihood. So when we get on social media, especially with when I was talking about this very subject with Matthew Rhoda back in episode 26, it's not really helping us to really have that conversation with people and smack them down, make them feel like they're not worthy, make them feel like that it's impossible for them to even create that value. Why spend our time with the trolls of Facebook, Instagram, X, whatever social media platform that you want to choose? Why is it worthy of spending our time doing that when we can use our time to build our 7-figure business? Find that accountability partner. Don't let it just be people that use you as sandpaper. And I know that you will easily be able to find out who those people are because all they will be looking for is this and that. This and that. It's almost like a clock ticking. You know at what approximate time they will be coming knocking on your door, wanting something a little bit more than what they just received from you previously. But it isn't just about what you are. You have rights, you have abilities to create that opportunity, and you should be able to serve who you think you need to serve. But that person that's checking in on you is a little bit different. They're not always asking you for something. They just want you to think a little bit further ahead in maybe what you're making as an important decision. Maybe they're just checking in with you, not only for the physical well-being, but for the mental as well. I think that I had so many people in my life at one point that cared about me, had always wondered what was going on, and especially when I dealt with my suicide 4 years ago now, I realized that maybe I had a lot more support than I first thought. But at the same time, I also was neglecting their willingness to help me out. Because I was so ashamed of who I was. I was not being that accountability partner when they were asking me to help them out. I was the victim of creating my own issues. So I don't look for pity. Why do I share this, though? I know that there are people still out there holding a grudge. They're still feeling that I am some sort of monster. And I think that the monsters that we create from those experiences can be slayed once and for all through love. And after we had this conversation, Kaneshi and I had a heart-to-heart about what is really important. And it's that love, that crazy, undeniable love. Say what you say and say it like you mean it, because it's out of love. I didn't love myself for the longest time. And I think that when I started my business, I was thinking that maybe I could just extend myself a little bit more to find that love. But I think through this process, especially of even starting my podcast, I learned a little bit about myself. Yeah, there's a lot of the common things that we've talked about. The autism diagnosis, the people that I wanted to forgive, The people that I knew that if I stood up to them, maybe they would finally listen to me because I had shown some self-confidence. But something has happened in me over these last few months after listening again to Kaneshi's episode that I want to share with all of you. That might be helpful, especially if you're struggling in this time period of not quite knowing how to best move forward. Just wait 48 hours to make any decision. I waited a long time, and I even took longer than 48 hours for that matter, to make a decision of my own, which is to finally deal with a problem that I had for the longest time. And it was actually something that was holding me back. And not to get into particulars, because on this show, I always respect the confidentiality of others, I will say that it is not just about the things that we deal with at the present, but what we ultimately deal with as problems in the future if we don't decide to address them. And I was not addressing something that was the biggest monster of them all for the longest time. As a result of that, I didn't love who I was. I didn't love what I was becoming. And I needed to find deep inside myself what makes my heart vibrate. And then I realized that the biggest thing that I always wanted to do was be able to live independently free, not being able to be held back, and knowing that if I would just accept who I am and love who I was with that crazy, undeniable feeling, I would be able to achieve the ultimate success. Since my interview with Kaneshi, I have made significant strides in my business to the point that I'm so proud of what I have become. And I know that there's a lot more work ahead of me, and I know that there's a lot of things yet to do. But there's something about the challenge that Kaneshi and I made that I want her to know after listening to this today, that I want all of you to know too after listening to this amazing 2-part interview. If we're able to live the most authentic type of lives in which we're free of the persecution, the promises that might have been broken, and even the pursuit of what we hold dear, we are able to create an identity for ourselves that isn't just about trying to find who we want to matchmake with, or even find the best company to work with, or even some other reason for our own purpose of our lives. If we can just say what we say and really mean it, and just love from a place in which it's crazy and undeniable, and if we're able to make a promise to each other that we will hold each other accountable no matter what, that's what's really important. We need to be able to connect with each other in a way in which we never thought we could connect. We need to be able to focus on what we're doing because it all brings value at the end of the day. We need to stop putting the bad messages on. Take that record off. Stop saying that you can't do it. Because you are able to do it. You are. I'll give you a moment to think about that. Because it is so important for you to know that it isn't just about what is happening in the business world. It's what's happening with you. Do you want to be laid off 3 more times before it finally settles in that maybe you shouldn't be living the life that you're living now? Are you trying to bypass or ignore the issues that you have? Stop doing it. You're worth it. What can we do to get you help today? As a coach, I want that to be the question that you are left with. Because there are amazing people out there that are doing the good work. And that means that you should have a piece of that pie as well. Because hope is out there. And we need to find catalysts just like Kaneshi is to be able to do just that. If you've been waiting this whole entire time to start your journey, now is the time to stop waiting. Because you got to love yourself in that crazy, undeniable way. And challenge yourself so that you're not stuck in a situation such as a trafficking problem. And find what you have to offer. because you have so much to offer. You are the example that other people need to see. And by you not doing what you need to do, you're just putting off the inevitable. Find your accountability partner. Find the person that will treat you for who you are, because you are worth it. And all the success is just waiting for you on the other side. And that success will not just define you. It will not just help you get to that new plateau, but it will allow you to share what's on your heart with that incredible love that you have to give. Thanks for listening to part 2 of episode number 96 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.